to you about quarrying soils and biodiversity. It's something I've been fortunate to have been involved with over the past 50 years. In recognition of their status and importance, the Institute has published guidance on the best practices for the handling of soils during the mineral extraction process. Slide. Why this talk? Well, soils have developed from the geology that they are associated with. So the surface development of mineral resources, mineral extraction, and the surface disposal of processing waste will involve the removal and replacement or creation of soils. Soils are now recognized to be natural capital and therefore an essential asset. Like the other natural capital assets, air, water, minerals, and biodiversity, it is an important resource that underpins our society. And we would not exist without soils. So, in recognition, the government has updated planning policy, and the expectation is that soils are to be safeguarded and managed. Soil is as important as the mineral resource being developed and not to be treated as an inconvenience in the muck shift. Slide. The topic of soil safeguarding and management is now of more significance for the minerals industry with the recent enactment of the Biodiversity Net Gain regulations. As I will demonstrate, the delivery of the BNG requirements is dependent on the soils and soil conditions provided. In cases of highly valued habitats, these will be very specific. Slide. Despite its small landmass, the UK is remarkably diverse in the types of soils and their intricate distribution. Of the 32 recognisable worldwide soil groups, the UK has 19 of them. The diversity of soils reflects the length and complexity of the climatic and geological history, including glaciation and sea level changes. This has resulted in a varied geomorphology of the uplands and lowlands, with the associated habitats and land uses at a landscape and very local scales. Despite human use and activity having fashioned the UK landscape as we know it, it remains inherently diverse. There are some 120 natural areas with characteristic and contrasting types and forms of vegetation in England alone. From this slide, you can see the associations between the individual natural areas on the right, with the discrete soil types in the centre and their parent geology on the left. The vegetation composition and structure of these areas is directly linked to the different soils and relief of the solid drift geology. This is because of the differences in tolerance of the plant species to the soil properties, such as the soil reaction, pH, bicarbonate and redox potential, base saturation of sodium, potassium, calcium and magnesium, and phytotoxic elements such as aluminium, ferrous iron and manganese, and the biological accumulation of nitrogen and phosphates. Consequently, the grasslands on thin calcareous rendzina soils of the Cretaceous North Downs have a different plant composition to the acid rancor soils of the Carboniferous Millstone Grit in the Peak District. The beech ash woodlands of the southeast of England are on chalk limestone, whereas the native Scots pine woodland occurs on podzolic soils, on silicious rock, and fluvial glacial deposits. In addition, there is the diversity of specialist plants and vegetation associated with certain geology. These are adapted to extreme conditions such as rock outcrops and phytotoxicity. The associated and interconnected soil biology diversity is also a reflection of soil and geological diversity, as is the macrofauna by way of the diversity of vegetation, habitat composition, structure, and food source. Slide. In considering soils and biodiversity, awareness is needed that they are a product of time, climate, and relief, as well as the geological parent material, biological organisms, and human intervention. There are three principal processes shown in this, as shown in this slide: the morpho-chronological, involving time, climate, relief, and geology; the hydrochemical, involving climate, relief, and geology; and the biological, also involving climate and geology. They're all interconnected. Slide. Time, that is the age of soils in the UK. Well, there are three landscape ages which have effects on the diversification of the geological parent materials and hence soil types and of their development too. These are manifest in their landscape and biodiversity character as shown on the earlier slide. The oldest landscape being in the south-central England, which was not glaciated in the last event, but affected by periglacial tundra boreal conditions. Central England with the older glacial history, and the north of England, Wales and Scotland and Ireland with the recently glaciated last event. Slide. Climate and relief act together, having effects on soil type and biodiversity with contrasting types on upland, lowlands, on steep or flat land, or in basins. Slide. Soils not only vary spatially on a landscape and local scale because of the process referred to, they can also be, and many are, differentiated vertically according to the same processes. Notably, shown here, the upper layer, the A horizon, commonly referred to as the topsoil, is the biologically most altered, active and biodiverse layer, and arguably the most important for the maintaining and creation of biodiversity. The underlying layers, the subsoil, are often and also have important functions and influences and need to be considered in terms of conservation, recovery, and the reuse of soil. They may be as essential in achieving the biodiversity aspirations as the topsoil. Slide. Soil resource surveys are the means of determining the types and their character and function of the soils, their distribution because of the of mineral development. Historically, resource surveys have been concerned with agricultural and forestry land use and their productivity, with no consideration to the biodiversity net gain requirements. This needs to change. All in situ soil resource assessments need to routinely identify their biodiversity potential capabilities and the soil requirements to achieve the objectives. They need to specify the recovery of the different soil types occurring and the functional, the component functional parts, and their reuse, or in some cases alternative provisions to create the necessary conditions to achieve the biodiversity net gain requirements. Where the BNG obligation is to be delivered off-site, there is a need to match the soil capability there too with the biodiversity aim. Hence, the soil resource surveys need to include these locations and those of third-party providers. Slide. Of course, mineral developments differ in the extent of soil cover and in the scope for backfilling and soil reuse. This will fundamentally influence the ability to recreate and create biodiversity within the site after quarrying and the need for the off-site BNG land to be included. Slide. The Institute of Quarrying recognises that soils are an integral part of the mineral extraction and are an essential resource and important asset in the conservation, recovery and enhancement of biodiversity. And I say it again, hence soils should not be considered simply as an inconvenient part of the muck shift. The Institute acknowledges that mineral developments involve the handling of soils which may have effect on the potential and functioning of the soil resource. In response, the Institute has published a good practice guide on soil handling. The guide is available to read and download on their website. I shall now only refer to parts of the guidance for the purpose of this talk. Slide. The key purposes of the guidance are set out in the slide. It consists of two parts. Part 1 gives the background and introduction. Part 2 gives the model and methods that are recommended. Slide. The guidance is integrated across and into the whole mine life planning and closure process, as you can see from this slide, from the planning side and then to the soil management plan side. Slide, please. The guidance provides model planning and operational guidance for the selection of machinery and practices. Slide. The guidance takes a risk-based approach for the selection of the machinery and practices. Slide. The guidance recognises the key functional and contrasting differences in the hydrochemical characteristics between soil types and the importance of their recreation. The causation of change may depend on the selected machinery and practices and the need to minimise additional compaction within the replaced soil profile. Compaction, and where it occurs within the profile, has profound effects. It's the most common result of soil handling in mineral workings. Here, I borrowed a diagram from Hollis and Lilly's excellent book on soils in the UK to illustrate that some soils are hydrologically different. In simplistic terms, either they have a very permeable topsoil where water percolates into the underlying subsoil, or a slowly permeable topsoil where rainfall discharges from the surface and or within the topsoil. Either they have a very permeable subsoil, or it is slowly permeable or slowly permeable within this part of the soil profile. These differences have different consequences for their biodiversity potentials as it alters the hydrological function from one to another type of soil. Slide. The guidance identifies which soils are at a higher and lower risk of compaction and damage through soil handling. This table from the guidance is for mineral particle size distribution, and is often referred to as texture of the soils, and their horizons where clay content is the key factor. Sandy soils have a high resilience, and fine silty clay soils a low resilience because of their differential clay content. Slide. The resilience to compaction is modified by water content, i.e. wetness of the soil material. This slide is from the guidance and sets out relative risks associated with different machinery and practices. All wet soils have a low resilience and will be compacted and damaged, with a consequence that hydrochemical functions will be altered. Slide. Soil wetness is a major operational challenge faced by the mineral industry, as it can affect planned resource extraction and profitability. Potential soil wetness varies geographically, between and within seasons, and between the hydrochemical distinct soil types I have referred to. For the reasons I have said, it will also be a challenge in the delivery of the biodiversity net gain aspirations, where compaction and drainage are determinants of the outcomes. Slide. Also of relevance is the ability to recover and relay thin and pattern soils and pattern ground. Guidance is given us the ability of machinery combinations to do this, and where mixing is to be avoided. This again may be significant in achieving the biodiversity objectives for some habitats. Slide. I would like to finish this short talk to emphasize that the guidance is an alive initiative. The guidance is being referred to with over 3,000 visits since its launch. The Institute would like to have your feedback, and you can do this via their website. And the Institute hopes to support and develop the guidance through workshops and seminars such as this. Slide. Thank you for listening. End.